Risk of Armageddon. Why President Joe Biden compares the war in Ukraine to the historic nuclear confrontation. Congressional underdog. An Arizona GOP hopeful battles against election odds one voter at a time. Conversion from Islam. An Iranian human rights activist shares the story of her journey and struggles to become a Christian. And fighting poverty. A Vatican conference tackles the challenges of international development and peace. On EWTN News Nightly for Friday, October 7th, 2022. Thank you so much for being with us tonight on the Feast of Our Lady of the Rosary. I'm Tracy Sable. President Joe Biden says the risk of nuclear Armageddon is at the highest level since 1962. His comment raises more questions about a global standoff with Russia. The president also raised eyebrows about his own Catholic faith when it comes to abortion. White House correspondent Owen Jensen reports. Owen?
Hi, Tracy, and good evening to you. At a Democratic fundraiser last night, President Joe Biden said, quote, "We have not faced the prospect of Armageddon since Kennedy and the Cuban Missile Crisis," end quote. Now, he was obviously referring to Russia's threat to use nuclear weapons in Ukraine. And today, the White House press secretary was asked about it. President Joe Biden boards Marine One without stopping to talk to reporters, but it's what he said last night, that the risk of nuclear Armageddon is at the highest level in over half a century, that prompted questions today.
So Russia's talk of using nuclear weapons is irresponsible, and there's no way to use them without unintended consequences. It cannot happen. We won't be intimidated by Putin's rhetoric. We have not seen any reason to adjust our own nuclear posture, nor do we have indications they are preparing to use them.
The president also said last night, "I happen to been a practicing Catholic. I support Roe v. Wade because it meets the medium of every major confessional faith," which says that, in the first trimester, it's between you and your doc. But the Catechism of the Catholic Church clearly states human life must be respected and protected absolutely from the moment of conception.
Right this way.
And in Hagerstown, Maryland, touring a Volvo factory where they make engines, transmissions, and axles, the president steps to the podium.
This is National Manufacturing Day, and this is starting to mean something again. National Manufacturing Day, when we celebrate workers.
His remarks come as America's employers slowed hiring in September, adding 263,000 jobs. But it will likely keep the Fed on pace to keep raising interest rates to fight inflation. In fact, the Fed has raised its benchmark interest rate 5 times this year. The Republican National Committee tweeting, "The September jobs report is the worst jobs report of the year and the second fewest jobs added since the COVID recovery began. Biden's economy is leaving families behind." Now back to the fear of a nuclear war possibly breaking out and what President Biden had to say last night. The White House said today there's no imminent threats and there's no new intelligence indicating Russia might be ready to use weapons of mass destruction, adding that President Putin can choose to de-escalate the situation at any time. At the White House, Owen Jensen, EWTN News Nightly.
Well, it's possible that President Joe Biden's son, Hunter Biden, could face a federal prosecution. The Washington Post reports there is evidence against the president's son in 2 areas. One would involve tax issues related to past business dealings in China. The other regards a statement about a possible illegal gun purchase. No decision has been made to move forward with the case. No actions are expected before the midterm elections. Police along the Las Vegas Strip questioned witnesses yesterday after a knife attack left 2 people dead and 6 others wounded. A 32-year-old male suspect is in police custody. The case remains under investigation. The impact of Hurricane Ian haunts thousands of homeowners in Florida. Many storm victims did not have flood insurance since they thought they were safe living inland, but heavy rain still damaged their homes. The Insurance Information Institute says only 4% of homeowners have flood insurance, even though 90% of catastrophes involve flooding. While some people living near Fort Myers Beach feel frustrated with the government response to Hurricane Ian, many have had to wait in long lines to reach a FEMA relief station. Power outages still affect tens of thousands of homes, and a number of people have no place to live. Mary Broomfield says that she hasn't seen any government officials in her community of Harlem Heights.
I don't have to live on Sanibel or Fort Myers Beach to be one of the people that they care about, because to me that seems like that's all they care about at this point.
The Federal Emergency Management Agency has thousands of staff members assigned to help hurricane victims, and it says it plans to open more disaster recovery centers like the one in Fort Myers. There are 3 joint recipients for this year's Nobel Peace Prize. The chair of the Norwegian Nobel Committee made that announcement today. One recipient is Ales Bialitsky from Belarus. He is a pro-democracy leader currently in jail for politically opposing the country's president. Also recognized is the Russian organization Memorial, founded back in 1987 to honor victims of Soviet communist repression. The third honoree is the Ukrainian Center for Civil Liberties, which is documenting alleged war crimes from the current war. Damage from bullet holes is seen at a town hall in southern Mexico after a deadly attack by a drug gang. Mexico's military has taken up positions after 20 people were killed Wednesday. The victims included the mayor and his father. Authorities are investigating whether the shooting involved rival cartels. Pope Francis mourns more than 30 people, including children, who died in yesterday's rampage at a daycare center in Thailand. The attacker killed his wife and child before taking his own life. He was a former police officer facing a drug charge. The Holy Father called the attack an act of unspeakable violence. And now, part 2 of our interview with Mary Mohammadi, the independent journalist and human rights activist from Iran. Yesterday, she discussed the weeks-long protest in her country after a young woman was killed in police custody. Tonight, Mary explains her own path to Christianity and how it also landed her in jail in Iran. What brought you to that point to become a Christian?
I can say it was a long process, not after a specific happening. And when I was a child, I really would love to know about other ideologies. And but nobody answered my questions because it's not acceptable for most of Muslims to ask about Islam or other ideologies. When I was 17, because I could learn the methods of research in high school, and I could access to resources and know how to research, and I wanted to know what was before Islam, Christianity, and before that as well.
What was it about Christianity that drew you in?
Many things. I don't know which one I should say the first. One of them is that at a time, and even now, I'm really sensitive about justice. And but around myself, in a world, actually, I'm just seeing cruelty. And at a time, I thought I'm alone. I'm different from others. I'm a problem, not cruel people. And but when I read the Bible and I could know the Jesus Christ, I saw that no, there is another person in the history that he thought like me, and it was like that I could find a friend.
It's not easy being a Christian in Iran, is it? What happened? Can you talk to us about your experience? What happened to you when you converted?
I had very bad reaction from my family, from society, and even the regime. They think that it's okay to convert to Christianity, but you should be quiet, always. I'll be honest with you, from the beginning, I couldn't believe that house church is a crime in Iran, because I thought with myself that we in house church we don't do any bad things and we don't hurt others. So why it is a crime? I really didn't believe. But when I myself was arrested, when I was in house church, and at that time I could believe, and even at that time I couldn't believe. In interrogations, I multiple times asked the interrogators that, really, you arrested me because I'm Christian?
When you were jailed, can you talk to us about what it was like and how you were able to get through that time, how your faith helped you through that time?
I was thinking that why I'm in prison, why I'm suffering these things for Jesus Christ. And I love Jesus Christ. And I can say an example for you. Imagine you have a boyfriend and you want to get married. You are ready to tolerate everything. But why not for Jesus Christ? But I'm proud of every kind of cause for Jesus Christ, for justice, for freedom, for all. This is my duty, my mission in my life. If I don't want to do that, I don't have reason even to stay alive. And prison is really small for me.
I want to talk about your name, Mary, because that wasn't your name at birth. You changed it to Mary.
Yes.
Tell us why.
You know, my legal name is Fatima, and this is an Islamic name. And when I converted to Christianity, I was thinking that maybe I can change my name. Mary is a good example for me, and I again ask this question: if not Mary, who? What name?
Coming up, a GOP congressional hopeful in Arizona tries to overcome the odds in a Democratic district. Plus, the pro-life implications of a proposed federal policy. The midterm elections are only a few weeks away, and Republicans are hoping to regain control of the U.S. House. In one Arizona district, an unknown candidate is facing an uphill battle to capture a seat long held by Democrats. Capitol Hill correspondent Eric Rosales has more.
I'm in South Phoenix, Arizona, in the state's 3rd Congressional District, where a true grassroots effort is taking place by Republican candidate Jeffrey Zink. He's trying to unseat incumbent Rueben Gallego in a heavily populated Hispanic district.
I walked for 6 weeks, 6 to 8 hours a day, 6 to 10 miles a day to get signatures to be on the ballot.
Jeffrey Zink has held many jobs: a curriculum developer, an NCAA basketball referee, and an ordained minister. He tells me the Lord cured him of debilitating physical ailments and told him to run.
God stood before me that night and said, I'm going to break your headaches, I'm going to restore your health, and I'm going to send you to Congress to represent my people.
It's an uphill battle. Democrats have controlled the largely Hispanic 3rd District since 2000. His kitchen table is campaign headquarters, and national Republicans advised him they wouldn't send money on his race. Zink tells me voters want a change.
We've had 3 Latino congressmen in this 22-year period. We went from 12% below the poverty line in 2000 to well over 70% below the poverty line now. I'm God-fearing, and I'm just a conservative that want government out of my homes. Well, most Latino families want that. The fathers want a good-paying job. There are no jobs here in this area.
He supports the Supreme Court's decision of having states decide the issue of abortion.
The Catholic Church and any person that is a Christian should know that this is wrong and something that we cannot support, and yet we have a candidate that is for it, and I am definitely against it.
If you are elected to office, what's your legislative agenda once you get there?
I want $87 billion to stay here in the United States and go to our needy and to our homeless and to our veterans and take care of them. We need to start taking care of ourselves.
He also favors enforcing current immigration laws, along with health care and election reform. Zink admits he was part of the rally on January 6th in Washington, D.C., but says he never went inside the Capitol. He condemns the destruction that took place, but does believe the election wasn't fair. It's important to note EWTN News Nightly reached out to Rueben Gallego for an on-camera interview. However, our emails never received a response. In Phoenix, Arizona, Eric Rosales, EWTN News Nightly.
With the midterms approaching, one issue that seems to have bipartisan support is an initiative regarding families. A recent survey found more than 7 out of 10 registered voters are in favor of paid family leave. The initiative offers financial assistance to parents of newborns or newly adopted children. One proposal would also provide tax breaks to companies that offer at least 12 weeks of paid family leave. We go now to Nadine Maenza, Senior Advisor for Patriot Voices. Nadine, welcome back. Always so great to see you. Let's talk more about this. I know your group is in favor of federal paid family leave. Talk to us about why you all feel this is so important. And I know it's, as we mentioned, one of the few issues that actually has bipartisan support.
It does. It's, 25% of all women go to work 10 to 14 days after having a child. Because they can't afford not to. The economy has changed. It's so hard for young families to have children. And with 40% of Americans not being able to afford a $400 expense, an unplanned pregnancy, unplanned child could be a financial catastrophe. This is a way to encourage families and to support families. And it does have bipartisan support. In fact, 19 organizations, conservative leaders came together and signed a letter asking Congress to prioritize this and to come together to craft a bipartisan, lasting paid family leave plan.
Yeah, and I know that you say family leave really is a pro-life issue. Can you talk to us more about that?
It is, because if we're going to support children through all parts of their life, and right now, half of the people that do choose abortion say they do so because of the cost of the child. And this is also such a win in so many different ways. There's so many benefits to paid leave. First of all, of course, for the child, having their mother there, the development for the child is increased, the health is increased for the mother, have less depressive symptoms and better mental and physical health. All sorts of studies show that the fathers are more involved in the rearing of the child if they're there those first few weeks. And we, of course, know that fathers that are involved in the child rearing early on are involved later, and that's better outcomes for the children. So this really is a pro-family, pro-life issue that should bring together both sides of the aisle.
Yeah, and that bonding time with parents and baby is so critically important. For those who don't support paid family leave, what are the arguments for that? Why don't they want to offer this benefit to families?
Well, there are conservative ways of doing this. If we've seen some of the most conservative senators and members of Congress, like Senator Mike Lee and Marco Rubio, coming up with their own plans. So there really isn't a good reason to oppose it. Once people really do a deep dive, with the birth rate dropping drastically over the past decade, paid family leave could help produce more taxpayers. So even from an economic standpoint, the return on investment is great. And 48% of those who make $30,000 or less go on public assistance. And after the birth of a baby, and almost 40% are less likely to if they have paid leave. So it keeps people off public assistance, has better outcomes for the mother, the baby, the father. If we really do believe families are the key to strong societies, then policies should be supporting strong families. And paid family leave is one of those policies that brings us all together, because I think that's one thing we can all agree on, is that we're all better off when families are stronger.
Absolutely. Nadine, we have a little bit less than a minute left, but can you tell us where exactly this issue stands at the federal level?
Sure. There have been several bills introduced by both Democrats and Republicans. And so what we're working on now is really a bipartisan plan, bringing them both sides together to negotiate something that we could all agree on. So we're hoping that even this year, something could come forward that could be both sides could support. We have a lot of information on a website called paidleaveforfamilies.com that can tell a little bit more. patriotvoices.com also has a link to find more about conservative ways to support paid family leave. But it looks like we could, if we saw enough support, public support, we could actually see a plan by the end of the year, which would be very exciting for families.
Absolutely. Nadine, thank you so much for taking the time to speak with us. We really appreciate it.
Thanks so much for having us.
Up next, the Holy Father prepares to declare 2 new saints. Plus, a faithful response to the challenges of international development and peace. On Sunday, Pope Francis will celebrate a Mass in St. Peter's Square and will declare 2 new Italian saints. Giovanni Battista Scalabrini, who founded the Missionaries of St. Charles Borromeo, together with the layman Artimide Zani, who dedicated his life to caring for the sick. And finally, tonight, a Vatican Foundation is hosting an international conference focused on ending poverty and promoting peace. The conference looks at the current state of poverty, especially after the coronavirus pandemic, and the goals of a better world in the future. The meeting also aims to strengthen the commitment to study new models of economic and social development inspired by Catholic social teaching. Joining us now from Rome is Elena Beccalli, full professor of banking at the Faculty of Banking, Finance and Insurance at the Catholic University of the Sacred Heart in Milan. Thank you so much for joining us today, Professor. We appreciate it. Can you tell us a little bit more about this conference and the themes that were discussed?
Oh, yes, very pleased to do this. Over the last 2 days here in Rome, we had this international conference of the Centesimus Annus Pro Pontifice Foundation, and we had the opportunity to discuss ways to put into action inclusive growth via sustainability and via the erosion of poverty. So we had more than 100 participants from all over the world discussing about inclusive growth. And we had several perspectives being discussed in the conference, the economic one, the geopolitical one, in order to find concrete actions in order to go into a new, different economic and social model.
And as we know, the World Day of the Poor will be commemorated in about a month on November 13th. In his message, the Pope stressed the consequences of the pandemic and also the war in Ukraine. How these major crises, how do you think they exacerbated poverty around the world?
Well, the global financial crisis first, and then the pandemic, and now the war, they all contribute to increase inequalities, and they all contribute to increase poverty around the world. Especially if we look at inequality, we have an increase of inequality within countries. And what we can say is that because of these continuous crises and shocks and failures, we cannot say that the current economic model is a good model. There are so many crises and failures that we must rethink the current paradigm.
And I understand you were the moderator of a meeting today. Can you tell us some more about that in the discussion?
Yes, we had this discussion in which we understood that public initiatives are very important. They are essential, but they are not enough in themselves. What we need to do is to take into account the role that business and finance can play in addition to the public initiatives. And in fact, we appreciated the idea that we must have companies with different missions and with different identity. Why do I say so? Because all companies have got the same purpose, that is value creation. But the major question is why, for whom? And this is a key point, because the traditional profit-oriented companies has to be put into question, and we must go into new types of companies, such as social businesses, benefit companies, or companies oriented to sustainability. All this calls for economic biodiversity that is essential in order to sustain over time the economic system.
Professor, thank you so much for talking to us today about all of that. We appreciate it. Elena Beccalli, full professor of banking at the Faculty of Banking, Finance and Insurance at the Catholic University of the Sacred Heart in Milan. Thank you again.
Thank you very much. Great pleasure.
And we thank you for watching tonight. For the entire EWTN News Nightly team, I'm Tracy Sable. Good night and God bless.